The book of Deuteronomy is the capstone of the Torah, of the law. It is the last of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Testament. The book of Deuteronomy oftentimes is cast as a memory, a last will and testament, if you will, of Moses to his people. There's a certain melancholy that supports this work, that underpins this book. And the melancholy rises from the reality that Moses has not trusted God. He did not trust God when he told him to strike the rock. He waited for an instant response and it didn't happen. We've all done that on the computer or with your phone, right? Something doesn't happen right away, you start until it does what you want it to do. Moses is told to strike the rock twice. Nothing happened. He hit it again. And because of that singular act of distrust, Moses is not allowed to enter into the land of promise. So he gathers his people as they themselves are about to go into the land that we call holy, and he himself will go to his death. He says to them, "Hear the statutes and decrees which I am teaching you, that you may live and enter into the land and take possession, that land which the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given to you. You shall not add anything, nor shall you subtract from it." He calls them to observe this law carefully, because it is in this observance of the law that the people will manifest, number one, their wisdom, not a wisdom that comes with age, but a wisdom that comes through a heart united with the heart of God, and it will also manifest their intelligence. And people will say, "Wow, what an incredible people this is. What a marvelous people this is. Who, because of their communion, because of their union with their God, live a life that is ordered, live a life that is upright." And he says to them, "Remember, there is no other God greater than ours, who has called you to his heart and seeks to give to you this land." Moses tries to move people, his people, those that he's led out of Egypt, those that he's put up with in the wandering and the quarreling in the desert for 40 years. Can you imagine? You think you have an argument with your spouse every once in a while? It's terrible. 40 years. 40 years. And he says to them, remember what God has done for you, and live as God has done for you. Live from your heart, he says to them, not from the head. Unfortunately, over the years, the law will evolve. We have a penchant as human beings to believe that the law is the solution to any ill or any problem that we might face. And the multiplicity of laws will guarantee a more ordered society. So the 10 Commandments from the time of Moses will eventually evolve to 613 commandments, each with the same weight. And by the way, it is a good thing to wash your hands before you eat. It's also not a bad idea to wash your produce when you get back home from the grocery store. And to change your sheets, too. It's all in there. There was a law that governed every aspect of Jewish life. And they go to Jesus, these Pharisees, and say to him, "What's wrong with your disciples? Why aren't they washing their hands before they eat? They're not observing the law." And Jesus doesn't condemn them because of the lack of observance to the law, but rather he condemns them because they are not observing the law because of their hearts. It's just a matter of the law. It's a rigid observance of the law that he condemns. Our response to law has to come from our heart. Jesus tells us to love each other. And we've all encountered people who are less lovable than we ourselves are. And we often say, "Well, I love you because Jesus tells me to love you, but I don't have to like you." And we do that. But Jesus says no. It has to come from our hearts. We don't make a full stop at a stop sign merely because the law tells us to, I hope. But by our not paying attention to that, we may endanger somebody else's life. Coming in this morning, it was kind of funny. Coming down High House Road from Green Level, there was a gentleman in a Maserati. Pulls up next to me, and he's revving the engine. He was old enough to know better. The light turns green. Off he sails. I thought, I've traveled this road in the last 2 months enough to know when these lights change. Light's going to turn red and he's going to have to stop. Comes to a screeching halt at the light. I catch up to him. Away we go again. All the way down to Davis Drive. And I thought, I bet you he's going to the club. I bet you he's playing golf. We get down that far, left turn, right in. What was the point? What was the point? Was I impressed by the car? No. I got over that stuff a long time ago. Was I impressed by his speed? No. Was I impressed by his childishness? Yes. Yes. What's in our heart? What's in our heart? There's nothing that we need to prove to anyone else except the realization and the reality that we love God and He loves us. That's all we need to prove. That's all we need to prove. And in a world that is so focused on the self and our self-importance, we come into an age of the Pharisees. And we become those Pharisees as well. The scriptures today, my friend, call us to a realization, as James reminds us, that all good giving and every perfect gift is from above. And he calls us to welcome that word into our hearts, into our souls, into our lives. Calls us and challenges us to live not with our heads, but with our hearts. Hearts filled with the mercy of God, hearts filled with the immensity of God's love for us, hearts that are secure in who we are because of Jesus Christ. We have nothing to prove. We have nothing to prove, but we have everything to lose. Our world and our lives are constantly challenged by the gospel, as they ought to be. As they ought to be. And yet, in our weakness and in our failing and in our struggle to live that gospel, that surety of Jesus' presence in our world comes to us, asking us to open our hearts to the fullness of his love, the fullness of his life, and to come to know in that wisdom, the fullness of his peace. We look for a lot in this world today. And yet, how often do we fail to realize we have everything that we need? That we have everything. We have Jesus Christ.